Okay. Where are my locks? Hello, this is Talking Stories. My name is Raquel Russell, and I'm so glad you're here. It's been a minute, so grab your tea, turn up the volume, and let's get started. Hi, and welcome back to Talking Stories with Raquel Russell. I am your host, Raquel Russell. I'm so glad you're here. As I said in the intro, it's been a minute. It is 2020. The last time an episode of Talking Stories came out, it was... Child, I want to say it was 2019. 2018? 2019? I've been gone, and I'm sorry. But I'm really glad to be back. A lot has happened in 2020. A lot. We've all said this at this point. We all came into 2020 thinking it was going to be our year. And good things have still happened, but also a pandemic has happened, and a very messy U.S. election, and a lot. But I am really glad to be here and being able to get out of the kind of emotional funk I felt that I got into for a lot of 2020. I'm blessed. I'm safe. I've got a home. I hope that you listening, you're safe and that you're able to get as much as you can out of this time, but that you're taking care of yourself and you're being kind overall. And I really, really missed this podcast and working on this podcast. So if you're new to the podcast, what Talking Stories is talking about the power of narrative, the power of stories and how it impacts and changes lives. In the first series that we did, it was talking about journalism in the comic book genre. So whether it was TV, comic books, or movies, I'm a big fan of comic book TV. There was a lot at one point. They're starting to dwindle down a bit now, at least in quality. No shade, sorry. But we spoke about things like Lois Lane, Iris West Allen, and representation from actresses like Candace Payton, LOL, yeah, Candace Payton, who plays Iris West, who is traditionally a white character with red hair, and Candace is a black woman, and she plays the role beautifully. And I think what I enjoyed about that series was getting to hear from some of our amazing guests. I had incredible people that I got to speak with about what they loved about these characters, and what motivated them from these characters and these stories, because stories really have the ability to change our mood, to make available things that we didn't think was possible for us. I grew up watching, you would see these clips of black presidents, and then we got a black president. I can't really tell you, maybe it was like a cartoon show where I would see a black woman as president, but the visualization, like even now of, at this point, Kamala Harris has been, she's now the vice president-elect, and I know that's going to be huge for kids coming up, and specifically for black girls and women of color, as they're coming up and seeing things that are possible for them. So yeah, that's the impetus for this show. We're talking about the power of stories in all shapes and forms, and I'm really glad to have such incredible people to speak with. One of the first people that you're going to be seeing actually in this episode was taped. I believe this episode was taped last year. Yes, this was taped last year, and I am so grateful to Justin for his patience. Some of the content, if I'm remembering, might be a little dated, but the principles and the themes of it still stand out, and they're still so powerful. You can go to the show notes if you're looking for a transcript, or if you're looking for any of the details that we talk about in this episode. But I'm so grateful for the chance for you to hear from Justin Malone. So a lot has happened since we recorded in 2019. We've experienced a lot of loss. Obviously, as I was talking about with the pandemic, this year, 2020 started off with a bang in terms of we lost Kobe, we lost Chadwick, we lost Naya, and I'm mentioning celebrities because oftentimes people that are larger than life, but also they bring to life, important stories, whether it's Naya in Glee or Chadwick with Black Panther, and just the universal way that it impacted, people in the Black community. And You know, Kobe, larger than life. That Kobe and Gianna leaving. Honestly, at this point, I feel like we should have known 2020 was going to be a wrap from there. Like, with everything that's happening, there's been a shift in how we go about and appreciate life. So this series that, you know, I conceptualized a while ago now, I think it still holds true for now. The power of the stories that we tell ourselves, whether it's about ourselves or those around us. And I'm really excited to actually get into this episode with Justin. Justin Malone, and I hope that you enjoy it. Let me know. We've got a lot, so as I said, we've got a lot to get into. But first, let me share. This is new. You're seeing, if you're hearing me, I'm also recording this, so we are posting the videos on YouTube. So please go and like us on YouTube. If you want to watch this episode, you can head over there if you're listening to the podcast right now. It's Talking Stories with Raquel Russell on YouTube. And in our show notes, there's all the social media details. So that's enough talking from me. Let's get into this episode with Justin Malone. Thank you for being back for Talking Stories. I'm looking forward to this new series. We have some really great guests coming up later in the series. And I'm excited for you to hear them and to engage and to maybe feel a little spark of hope and an ability to make a difference in the world. Thanks. Have a great one. Thank you for joining me, Justin. We have Justin Malone here with us on Talking Stories. I'm so excited to have you here. Justin, how are you doing?
I'm great, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you. So a little bit of backstory for our listeners. I actually met Justin. We met through the Build Your Own Brand retreat that took place earlier. I think it was May. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, it was May, like Memorial Day weekend, actually.
Right, American Memorial Day weekend. So actually, Justin, where are you right now? What state are you in right now?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia.
You're still in Atlanta. Okay, great.
Yep.
So we're talking from Toronto to Atlanta, and I was so glad to be at Build Your Own Brand because it's such a great gathering. It's labeled as a gathering for diverse creators and makers and dream chasers, and we all just get to really bond over the different things that we're passionate over. And one of the things that connected you and I was actually stories. And
Yes.
I was so glad that we got to really talk about how important storytelling is in both of our lives and both of the things that we're doing. So before I go any further with, the conversation about the power of stories, Justin, can you tell our listeners about yourself?
Yes, I'm Justin Malone, originally from Memphis, Tennessee. I consider myself a digital storyteller. Stories mean so much to me because I think with the power of a story, you can really just impact other people as well. Not just staying in the negative of anything, but really just trying to just maneuver through life because each one of us has our own unique story. And how can we share those stories to uplift and inspire the next generation, next person, our brothers, our sisters, our moms, our dads, just people in the community, just trying to push that culture forward.
And I love that about, we're motivating other people. And I think, sometimes we forget just how powerful it is that when we're doing something to benefit those around us. And it's not just necessarily for us to be able to say, hey, I got my story and I know what I'm doing, but using the power of our story to help inspiring others. And I think that mission that you have is amazing. Really quickly. So Justin, I know that with this series, what we're wanting to talk about is the power of personal storytelling. And I know for me, there's been so many things in my life that I've been able to say, okay, this isn't going to define me, and taking it and, bundling it up in a way that it can help inspire myself and motivate me, whether it's in my career, whether it's in my relationships, whether it's in, my church and my community. And I know that you have a strong story. Can you go ahead and share with us what your personal story is and how it has brought you through different chapters of your life?
Okay, so like I said, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm a first generation college graduate. So before me, no one in my family had gone off to college and completed it. Some people went to college, didn't finish. So growing up, I was always told that education is so important. Education is so important. And I truly still believe that education is really important. But when I went off to school, I was just under the mindset of, if I go to school, if I graduate, I get a good job, and everything else should be just fine. Because of that, I come from a household where we didn't have that much money. I applied to over 60 schools, and that was more so out of fear, because I was scared that if I didn't get enough money to go off to school, I wouldn't be able to go at all.
Mm.
Because I was just totally against taking any debt if possible. If I had to take any debt, I want to be as minimal as possible. So fortunately for me, I was able to go off to school for free and everything like that. Struggled throughout the entire process of my 4 years in undergrad. And once I walked across that stage, I cried, not because of the feat that I did. It was more so of me crying because I felt like I took, I would say, the glass ceiling, or the torch, the metaphorical torch, further from my family. I have a little sister, so I wanted to show her that it was possible, because before me, it seemed virtually impossible.
Mm.
But what was interesting about that same moment, I didn't look at that moment as my moment.
Right.
I looked at it as my family's moment. I looked at it as my grandmother's sacrifice. I looked at it as my mother's sacrifice. But it wasn't about me. To this day, I still haven't seen in person the physical copy of my diploma, because my biggest thing is, I don't think it's about me. I told my mom she can
Ah,
hang it up or whatever.
right.
um we have an insider between my mom and I. We have an insider. I told her I don't want to see it until I achieve a personal goal of mine.
Yeah.
But when I walked across that stage, it was really about them. But on the other side of that, I didn't feel like I did everything that I wanted to do during my 4 years in college.
Mm.
I don't feel like I explored everything the way I wanted to explore it as well.
Right.
So going into that summer after college, I still didn't have a job. And I was like, I don't understand this, because I was told all throughout my life, go to school, get an education, and everything else will be done for you. And that wasn't true. I
Right.
struggled to find a job. I had money saved from after my graduation. I blew through the money, not doing anything stupid. I blew through the money going to New York, going down to DC, different things like that, just constantly interviewing, constantly taking my one suit to the dry cleaners to be clean so I could be prepped for every single interview that I did. And it got so bad that the apartment that I was staying in at the time, I had to move out of it because it was the end of my lease.
Right.
I had to actually move in with two of my friends and
Yeah.
stay on their couch just to make ends meet, because I didn't even have enough money to catch a one-way flight back home to Memphis.
Yeah.
And during that whole time, I started to become depressed. I
Hmm.
started having anxiety attacks, things like that. And to even make this more candid, I was also in a relationship during that time as well. And things started to go south in that too. So overall in my life, I felt like there was nothing else. I had little to no hope. And I found a job, and I'm thankful for that job. But that job put me in a position where I had to live not necessarily in the best apartment. I didn't make that much money, things like that. And overall, it really put me in a very negative, I would say, mental headspace.
Right.
And it got to the point where one day I just stumbled over an Eric Thomas video, and it was I think it's called UOU. And
Mm.
after seeing that video, I was just like, this is the bottom. And I can't just sit here and just whine and complain and just be absorbed by all the negativity in my life. I have to really just go for like what I want out of life. And at that point, I didn't know what I wanted out of life. But what I did was I put on my basketball shorts. I threw on some sneakers, and I just ran. I think I ran for about 3.5 miles. I stopped at one of my line brothers' houses, and I was just like, "Hey, like, man, I know you've been down too. We've both been down. We got to get out of this funk." So ever since then, I've been very, very intentional with trying to just understand myself, my headspace, and really just trying to look at that moment in particular as the lowest that I ever want to be in life. And with that same mentality, the only thing I could do at that moment was look up. So with looking up, it was like, I have a brighter future, and let's really just learn who Justin Malone is.
I'm shaking my head and nodding for anyone who's listening to the podcast. If you're watching the video, you can see me nodding, but I am blown away by, I think there's two specific things that are really coming to mind, is that you said something about, being intentional. And it sounds to me like one of those aspects about being intentional was making sure that there were people around you. You mentioned, going over and you got your friend, you're talking with your friend, and you had surrounded yourself. And even now you have, the accountability of your family, and specifically your mom, who you said is going to let you see this, this certificate, the diploma, once you have attained that specific goal. Are there any other items that you find yourself using now, or tactics to help you continue to stay intentional with this story that you're creating for yourself?
I would say for myself to be very candid, and I really want the listeners out there and the viewers watching this right now to really understand that the most important part of a story is that a story isn't always just good. And what I mean by that is you can be at a bad place, be at a good place, and you may not necessarily go into as bad of a place that you were in at the beginning, but life is just like, I'm a big Crit fan, and he has this one song where he says life is an EQ of highs and lows. So I really want people to understand that, because to be very, very candid, like I'm happy that we're talking right now, because where I am right now is more so I'm not on a high. I've actually had some things happen in my life recently where not necessarily the biggest fan of them or how things played out, but at the same time, I'm going through my process, not as much as it was back then, but it's cool to understand that sometimes you can rely on the process that you had from the past to help you get through a process right now. So to answer the question of the things that I really do, I'm really going back to my playbook from that moment. That was back in 2015. So once again, being very intentional with the people that I interact with. My circle has gotten so much smaller. I have my few people that I talk to, my mom, some of my close friends, people like that, those friends that I consider them my brothers, my sisters, you know what I mean? But also delving back into the things that I love. For example, exercising, reading, just delving into just positive talk. Reading the Bible more, because that's something that when I see myself fall into like a negative headspace or just negative things start to happen to me, I feel that I lose my sense of spirituality. So delving back to it, I really call it going back to the basics.
And you know what, to even be candid with you, I think that's some of the things that for me, whenever I feel, I'm on shaky ground, whether it's about, vision building or my purpose, it's always those things that you mentioned of like going back and having, those people around you that actually sharpen you. The Bible says like having people, iron sharpens iron. Like you don't want people who are just, on the wayside and pulling you down, and making sure that you're going back to those things that have given you the strong foundation in the past, you know. And I think sometimes we can get so distracted, you know, with those lows that we go through, and it's really goes back to, you know, even the stories that we like to listen to, the stories, the movies that we like to watch, the TV shows, all that kind of thing. There is always, you know, that long chapter of where there's an obstacle and things look their bleakest. And then out of, you know, all of the drama that comes together, there's a solution that appears. But, you know, a lot of us, that solution seems a far way off. But just as you were saying, you know, to continue to delve back into those things that give us strength, you know, whether it's scripture, you know, whether it's surrounding ourselves with good people and, you know, speaking life to ourselves, then we can continue to move forward in, you know, developing this beautiful story that, you know, we all are going to have. I mean, to quickly, I don't know, I might edit this out. Maybe I'll keep it. But recently we just, in Toronto, we just lost a beautiful, beautiful man. He was, you know, an activist, a storyteller in the community. He worked with our youth, especially our racialized youth in Toronto. And he was just, you knew him by the way that he loved people around him. His name is Jordon Veira. And he really impacted me in this last couple of days, even as I was preparing for, you know, this conversation, is that he was always so real about, you know, his story and about what was going on in his life, you know, whether he was having, you know, struggles about how we see the news, things that are happening in the States, things that are happening here in Canada, whether it's with police brutality, with, you know, getting into educational spaces, especially as Black people. He was always raw and real about that exploration of things happening in his life. And you know, we got to have the privilege of following him a lot on these journeys. He made spaces for people to, you know, spoken word and all of these great art forms. And I think with that life that he lived, even though, you know, he's left us, you know, it's easy to say too soon, you know, God knows what he's doing. He was 26 years old. But
so young.
Yeah, so young. But the power of his story stays with all of us who were impacted. I know thousands of people, literally thousands of people, have been impacted by his life. And I think that's just a testament to the story that came around him and that he allowed himself to tell others about himself. And he was always real. And just back to what you were saying of, you know, it's this farce that we try to put up, it doesn't work. It doesn't work, you know?
Not at all.
At all. Right. And thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being real about, you know, that path that you've come through to where you are now. And actually, can you tell us about what it is that you do now with this wonderful thing called the Making Black History Project?
So the Making Black History Project really came about, I would say, I thought of the idea right before Black History Month. So right before February, I was just thinking to myself, I was like, I really am just about pushing the culture forward. And I think that like my overarching, like I would say, theory is just, this is the first time in honestly just life that we as a people can own our own narrative. With the internet and social media, we can own our own authentic stories. It's ironic that people typically try to put on the front and things like that, but if we reverse that and just be our authentic selves, then we can really uplift and inspire other people through just our own stories. And in particular, thinking about the Making Black History Project, I think people typically think of Black history in a vacuum. They think of Black history either as, you know, something that we only celebrate in February, or they only think about the past. They think about Martin Luther.
Ago, it's not us.
Exactly. And the key word in the Making Black History Project is making, ing, meaning that it's continuous, it's happening right now.
Right.
So the project overall really is about just highlighting Black people who are just trying to push the culture forward right now. People that may be, you know, well on their way of doing it already, or people who are just starting. Because I think when we look at people on the internet, everyone seems so much more ahead of us. You know what I mean? And it's great on one end because you see people doing great things. But what sucks about it, in my opinion, is when you see somebody that's so much more ahead of you, per se, it makes you feel like you're behind.
Yeah.
So lots of people start to feel like they can't do anything at all. I'm just going to stay where I am and not try to, push the envelope and just try to go for that thing that they're passionate about. So ultimately, the Making Black History Project goal is really to, one, highlight the people who are, right now and trying to push the culture forward, but also two, and uplift and inspire the people who have that idea, or people who are early in their process to just keep going.
Love, absolutely love that, because, you mentioned that, when you're watching social media and you're looking, Instagram stories and Facebook and all that, everyone seems like they're so ahead. There was actually an article that came out a couple of weeks ago. I'll have to get the name and include it in the show notes. But it was talking about how millennials specifically, there's a lot of burnout and fatigue specifically on feeling like they're always behind, because your phone is always in your hand. And I know for myself, like I work in communications and I'm a social media manager, and I'm always seeing content, and everyone, is on vacation, they're getting married, they're having their second kid, they're starting their third business, and it never shuts off. And a lot of us, we're not getting enough sleep. So, you sleep 4 hours and then you wake up and you're still on that kind of rat race of, oh, I got to catch up. So that's why I think this project, it's so inspiring in that we get to see that real face of people. And I keep saying real, but for me, authenticity is so important, especially in, the culture, like, Black culture, African American culture, Black culture here in Toronto, everyone's just, it feels sometimes like everyone's trying to one up each other. And
I hate that, because the thing about it, the thing that I hate the most about that is it's turning something that's good into something that's bad. So I was on Facebook a couple of days ago, and I saw, like, Facebook has a whole bunch of memes. Yeah. So I saw this meme in particular. It was saying something about, like, oh, stun on the person that hurt you, da 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 da. And when I saw that, it upset me, because I was like, why stunt on someone who hurt you, or why one up someone who's doing something great just so you can be greater? Why not celebrate where they are in their process?
Right.
And why can't they do the same thing for you?
That, because what I was saying is, it doesn't last you trying to one up them. What is that feeling you're going to have? It's
just a moment.
Exactly.
It's just a moment. That's when people start comparing themselves to one another. That's when that's when happiness isn't true happiness. Yeah. You get your happiness or fake happiness from just doing better than someone else. That's contingent on someone else. I think true happiness comes from within. No one can make you happy. I think people can help you feel happy, but true happiness comes from inside oneself.
Amen. Yeah. That's an important distinction. And that's why it's important, to, again, be able to mobilize your story for yourself and speak to yourself about how far that you've come and what you've accomplished. I have an acquaintance, Shireen Taylor. She just tweeted the other day about, writing down your accomplishments and writing down the things that you've done, so you can be able to look back at that and say, hey, look, this is something that I can feel good about, because it's something that's lasting, and it's something that's it's internal. This isn't something that's external. And it goes right back to everything that we talked about, with family, with scripture, and building yourself up with all of these amazing and good things. Thank you for that, Justin. Really quickly, I wanted to go into, we talked about a bit about this, negative stories. But specifically, are there any tips that you would have for not allowing negative stories about yourself to define your future?
This one's tough.
Okay.
This question right here is really, really tough, because I could come on here right now and just say, don't listen to it, ignore it, all those things. But that's hard. It's really hard to do that. So what I would say is, don't internalize it. It's hard to not pay attention. Sometimes people will pull out that trigger and they know it's a trigger.
Right.
They know it's a trigger. And it sometimes can even make you second guess yourself. But understand that just because maybe this happened while you were growing up, or this thing happened a couple of years ago, or a few months ago, whatever that thing is, or those things are, don't allow that to define you right now.
Right.
Like, don't allow it to define you right now. And I would say it's much easier said than done, but don't internalize it. Understand that you are in your journey. I think people are so focused on the destination that they ignore the process. They don't value the journey in of itself. So really just understand that that negative story, yes, like when you hear it, when you see it, it's gonna hurt. And
Yeah.
be okay with like being in your emotions, understanding, but give yourself the opportunity to understand those emotions, but don't allow your emotions to dictate what you do next. Don't allow your emotions to dictate how you respond if it's to someone else. Like, just give yourself the opportunity to understand those emotions, process them, understand that this is a part of the journey. It
Right.
doesn't define you, and you just keep going. Just keep going. Just keep fighting. Because at the end of the day, when that storm comes, sooner or later that cloud is going to be gone and it's going to
Mhm.
be a sunny day. That sunny day may take a couple of days, it may take a couple of months, but at
Exactly.
the end of the day, you just have to weather the storm.
Right. I'm clapping my hands like I'm in church because that was a message. I hope everyone was taking notes. You should be taking notes and talking stories. I'm joking. But that is speaking to me, and I hope that our listeners are really feeling that and taking that forward, and not just listening and then forgetting about it. I know for me, one of the ways that I try to dispel with negative stories that I often I struggle with a lot of dark thoughts, and I can sit in my room all day and just, well, not all day, after work or even at work, and just thinking about the things that could tear me down, or the things that have happened in the past. And I know that's something that I struggle with, of not letting past things define me in my future, and really shake that off. I know that has been a goal of mine since 2017. I really started intentionally trying to break down those past stories that I've told myself, and to continue to walk into a brighter future, and not say, oh, I'm too timid to do this. Oh, I don't have enough experience to apply for that job. I got the job. I'm too, I don't have enough special effects or equipment to do a podcast. I'm doing the podcast. But I think one of those things that has helped me is to write things down. I don't know what your opinion is on journaling, but I know for me, bullet journals. So yeah, tell me, what is it with journals? What do you do? Do you do bullet journals?
I love journaling. I don't necessarily bullet journal. I just like to just freeform.
Right.
So what I love about journaling the most is I feel like, so I'll be candid. Like sometimes I suffer from anxiety.
Yeah.
So I sometimes allow past things impact future. And sometimes even if it's nothing with the past, it's just more so of sometimes I put too much pressure on myself. Like I just want to be great, you know?
Right.
So like, to be very candid, not gonna go into like the things that's really been bothering me, or what has impacted me in a negative way recently. But what I've started to do, and I did this in the past as well, is just journal.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about it is, sometimes when we're in our thoughts, so many thoughts run around all at once,
Mm-hmm.
that we're not able to really conceptualize what's going on. We're just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know why I'm thinking this.
Yeah.
But when you just pull out that journal and just write, not caring about grammatical errors, anything like that, no periods, no commas, it's up to how you like to write. But what I really enjoy about journaling, it really just gets my thoughts out on the page. It
Yes.
helps me really just figure out just like what is truly bothering me. If something is bothering me, I see it on a page and I revisit it. And
Right.
then as I process that and think about it, that then educates what I'm going to write about maybe the next day or the
Mm.
next week, things like that. So it helps like kind of just go down that pathway of understanding what's bothering you, what's giving you that anxiety if you're very anxious. And it helps kind of quell that. It may not necessarily help long term, but at least for that moment, that day, it kind of gets you straight. And you can, it enables you to better articulate that when you're talking to like your counsel, whether that's, you know, friends, family, therapists, whoever it may be.
I totally 100% co-sign everything you just said. Not that you need a cosign, but that has been something that's been instrumental in just relieving my brain. And I know I mentioned earlier bullet journals. For folks who don't know what a bullet journal is, it's just a technique of journaling. So it's more, again, no worries about grammatical errors, just, you know, a little bullet point, and then you say, oh, I had this to eat today, or, you know, just everything that's in your brain, all the clutter that's in your brain, you write it down. There's a whole index form. I'll include a link again in the show notes. It's just another way for you to get your thoughts down. But journaling in general, I think it is so important. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that it is a solution for, you know, mental health issues such as, you know, anxiety or depression. But I know for me, and I don't say that to take away from anyone who's had that experience, but I just want to acknowledge, you know, some people, you know, need to go to therapy and, you know, medication needs to be involved. But I know for me, when it's come to, you know, issues like anxiety, that has been helpful in just arranging my mind, just like you said, and just getting it off your head, going to sleep. I specifically journal at night. I don't know, Justin, when do you journal? Do you journal in the day, at night?
I typically journal at night as well, because
Yeah.
it gives me the clarity of just really unpacking everything that I thought throughout the day.
Right.
And it's a fresh start for the morning as well.
Right. I agree. Totally
Yeah.
agree. Thank you. Thank you for talking about journals, because I think I could talk a long time about journals. I've been journaling. Well, I called it a diary before, because I don't know if this is official, but a diary is when you can just do it every once in a while, right? And then a journal, it has to be every day. I think
I'm not sure. The reason I like calling it a journal,
yeah.
because like with a journal, it's not, for me, it's not just about writing my thoughts. It's also a good place to then make those thoughts actionable.
Hey,
Whereas with a diary, I feel like it's more so just writing your thoughts.
I like that distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that fits right back in with, you know, pushing forward with your story and pushing forward the culture. What is one of the stories from, you know, your Making Black History project? Is there any specific story that's really stuck with you, or one that immediately comes to mind that's inspired you?
Absolutely. My favorite one, oh, I don't want to say favorite because the other people are going to be like, oh, you didn't like mine. What I would say the one that touched me the most was
Right.
actually from one of my closest friends.
Okay.
What makes this story so unique to me is he was there when I was going through everything that I was going through right when I graduated and everything. What's unique about him was we're fraternity brothers, but we weren't as close initially. Like
Okay.
he knew of me, I knew of him. We hung out sometime. He had my phone number, I had his as well. And he just reached out at the right time.
Yeah.
And he didn't know it. Like he called
Wow.
me, he called me just like, hey man, like I'm doing this financial seminar. I want you to come to it. I come to it, and I'm having a good time and everything. I didn't have a ride back to my apartment. So
Hmm.
he drove me back and we were just talking, and I just told him like, man, a lot of stuff's been going on. Like I just started this job. I don't like it. They don't pay me that much. I've just been depressed. I've been down. Like I just feel hopeless. And he was just like, man, you know, I just live a block away. Just come over sometimes whenever you want to talk, whenever you just want to kick it, whenever you just want to kick back and just not think about life, you can
Yeah.
always come over here. And it went from me going over there every once in a while to almost every day he was either in my apartment or I was at his apartment.
Right.
He was writing a book at the time, and I was just trying to get my life together. So we were both just kind of pushing each other. And he was the one that really got me in this mindset of I don't have to settle. I
Hmm.
can keep pushing forward. This does not define me. I can keep pushing forward as long as I want to keep pushing. So it was what makes his story so unique was at the time he was a professor
Okay.
at Drexel University.
Okay.
And now he's doing stuff, I believe, in education technology or something like that. But what's unique to me about his story in particular is he comes from a childhood where he describes himself as like Trey from Boys in the Hood, I believe.
Yeah.
He was like I've seen a lot of stuff growing up.
Yeah.
I had family members that are in gangs and all this, but despite all of the things that I've seen throughout my life, I did not allow that to define me. I've been able to go from literally nothing to something, and I'm still pushing forward every single day. And for
Wow.
me, that really touches me a lot because it just shows like foundationally, no matter where you start, you can go somewhere much higher. And he's still not content. He's like, I still want more. I still want to push forward. And he did publish that book too,
Hey,
which I'm
there
excited
you
about. So
go.
it's like, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Find that book. Okay. That is so good. I'm glad to hear that. And I'm so glad that you were doing this project. I look forward to, tuning in to more of the episodes that as they come, and everything that you share. Justin, quickly just wanted to say we're almost out of time, but
Oh wow, that's fast.
yeah, I know. I know. Thank you so much for, sharing your truths, for being real with us and talking about your personal story. I know that I've been inspired listening to you, listening from where you've come from, what it is you're doing now, the connections that you're building, the content and the stories that you're telling. Can you just give us, if there's any quick word that you would want to say to our listeners, you feel free to just say something quickly now.
I've already touched on it a little bit already, but I would just say really quickly, just don't let this moment right now, today, define who you are.
Mm-hmm.
We all make mistakes. We all have ups and downs. It's less about the destination and more about the journey. It's about really learning throughout the whole entire journey. And it's not only about yourself. It's about uplifting and inspiring others as well. People that's, behind you, people that's in front of you, people that's right beside you as well. We're all in this together. So at the end of the day, just keep pushing forward.
Amen. Amen. Where can our listeners find you?
Okay, you can find me mainly on Instagram. My Instagram handle is J.Malone, MALONE 92. You can also find me on Twitter at Malone Justin. And you can also find me at my website, justinmalone.me.
Perfect. .me. Great. And if anyone you're looking for those notes, you can find them again on our show notes. They'll be at raquelarussell.com. And my name's Raquel Russell. Thank you so much, Justin, for talking with us on Talking Stories. We look forward to following up with you and keeping up with your story. All the best.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.